Now, you remember the last couple weeks we showed how that the Old Testament program, as it was laid out in Psalms chapter 2, never gave the slightest hint of this 1900 and some years of what we call the church age. It's just not in there. The Old Testament program foretold the coming of the nation of Israel on the scene, of course, by virtue of the Abrahamic covenant, and how that the Messiah came and they rejected him, they crucified him, and then after that was to come the tribulation, that awful period of 7 years spoken of in Daniel, and then Christ would return and set up his kingdom. Not a mention of the church in there whatsoever. But as we've been pointing out, that just when it seemed like the rebellion was reaching its pinnacle under Saul of Tarsus, God saved the chief rebel by grace on the road to Damascus. And so we've been recapping all that. And then you'll remember when we were together in the last program in Acts chapter 15, I pointed out how that the Jewish believers at Jerusalem had gotten all shook up over the fact that Paul and Barnabas were bringing Gentiles into the church up there at Antioch. And consequently, they sent men from Jerusalem to check it out, and indeed it was true. And it just caused so much consternation that they requested that Paul and Barnabas come down to Jerusalem, and I call it calling them on the carpet, because they were bringing Gentiles in and offering them God's salvation. I mean, that was just anathema to the Jew of that time. And then you remember in our closing moments, I showed how that Peter had been silent during all the first part of this great controversy in Acts chapter 15, until finally, sovereignly, God reminded him of what he had experienced 12 years before when he had gone up to the house, you remember, of Cornelius. And I always stress the fact that Peter, the good law-keeping Jew, didn't really want to go to Cornelius. I always put it as heel marks in the sand from Joppa to Caesarea. But God forced it for this situation right here. Because had Peter not had that experience of seeing Gentiles saved in Acts chapter 10, I doubt very much that he would have come to Paul's defense here in Acts 15, and had not Peter come to Paul's defense here in chapter 15, I'm afraid Christianity would have stopped in its tracks. But God in his sovereignty, of course, wasn't going to allow that to happen. So then Peter, verse 7 now, chapter 15, when there'd been much disputing. See, so I'm sure that this was later on after the meeting had begun.